recording, start stream. Alrighty then. Should be good to be going, yeah. Cool. And here we go with that. Alright, so what do I want to go with today? So there's a large zone in mine. There is actually not the camera. Okay. So, let's see what we got here. Started this one a while back, and it was just going to be a spearhead of some sort, with two parts glued together. That's what I'm going to be working on a little bit today. See if I can actually get it to be the shape of a spearhead. Let me know if the music is too loud or if I'm too loud or something like that. Still working on the kinks of the audio. Yeah, so sadly, I had bought a brand new box cutter to help with this because box cutters work really well, and I seem to have misplaced it. So Okay. So these might use them later project, who knows? Got a whole bin of them over here. Right. So this might end up looking more like a dagger than a spearhead. However, you want to figure out about how thick I want the main shaft of it to be. Okay. So what I did there is I just took out 2 notches on each side, so I can give myself a guide of, if this were to be attached to an actual weapon, it would be the steel cap that would fit onto the wooden pole, possibly with a spike going on the middle. And then this would be the steel spear guard, for lack of a better term. In case the spear tip snapped off, this would still stay there. And then you have your blade, and then you have your fine tip, which is intended to snap off. So, we shall see how it goes from here. Get finally cone shape. Okay. So, as you can see, keep shaving off slight layers until a flat side turns into a dome side. And then you end up having a nice fine edge that you can then hone to a very point. You just keep doing that until you have a nice, it's like a smushed egg, real flat. So I went from something like this to where you can see the flat part, it's only carved a little bit, not much done down here at the bottom, to it's got a nice curve towards both sides, and then it is concave. I think that's yes, it's going inward towards the snap off point, which would eventually be essentially a hammer if it were to break off. And that is seeing the different sides. This is the worked side, that's the non-worked side. Okay. Go back to this, and we'll work on the tip a little bit more once we get this into shape. Really wish I had not misplaced my box cutter. And made this much simpler, actually, but that's good enough. Okay. This needs to be shaved down a little bit. out. A little bit right there. Yeah. So I've now worked both sides. Once I bring it in here, I can do the tip of that part, but it is now actually two-sided and has fair spear shape. I will have to trim this side up a little bit to make it symmetrical. This way. Yeah, okay. Oop. Elbow. Yeah, so this I want to get down to a thinner point so that way mechanically it could easily snap off, because back in the day they would design their spear tips to break off inside their opponent to guarantee a death, or at least some cultures, but not all cultures. Gotta try to remember to keep it in the camera view. That way you can all see what I'm doing. So anyway, for this design of a spear head, it is essentially making two of itself. So we have a larger one that should hopefully stay attached to the weapon, can be used multiple times, and then the small one, which would be designed to snap off and actually come away, so that way they would stay inside the opponent, causing them to bleed out. Okay. So now I am trying to sharpen the edges of the fine tip of the sphere, which I have to keep shrinking its thickness down entirely because it's supposed to be able to pierce easily and then snap off. So it's got to be thin enough to snap, but thick enough to pierce. Then you also have to have a fine enough point widthwise in order to make that pressure possible. Oh, and these are two pieces of foam that I had that were technically scrapped from another project that I was doing, and I hot glued them together, which not the most effective, but still worked. The hot glue once or melted the styrofoam, but then it still quickly cooled and stuck together. So a little odd. Oh, I don't know if you guys can tell because there's a center line going down. It barely shows up. Okay. Awesome. Not perfectly symmetrical, but that can actually be fairly easily adjusted. Just a little further back. There we go. It's close enough that I'm willing to keep it in. And I just need to smooth this out a little bit. It's got some protrusions. want this to kind of look almost like raw iron on this area. So I want it to be still rough looking. Then when I eventually decide to paint it, it'll just be the texture. And I'll try and make it look reddish. Okay. Little off here. So I'm going to take a bit away. So that is the fine tuning of the upper part of the spearhead. If you don't have tiny scissors like this, it makes it really helpful. But I think this is just makeup scissors. They're super tiny. They're awesome. And if you want to round off something, make a handle, just cut off the corners along the way, and then cut off those corners of that corner that you just cut off. And then just keep going gently until you've got a nice rounded edge. Voila. We have ourselves a spearhead. Now, once it is painted, then it will look obviously much better. But this is the part that would attach to the actual shaft of the wooden pole or steel pole. Can be gripped. It's a little short for my personal hand, but you know, last ditch effort. You grip that like a knife. And then you have, I can figure that up a little bit there. Yeah, let me get this bit. Much better. Alright, so there is a spearhead. Now, let's see, how long is this going to go on the stream? About the 35-minute mark, so let's see what else I can do here. For a hot second. So, what should we do next? Let's see what the dimensions of this are. Just under 3 by just under 4. So we can do a 3 by 3 object or 2 by 2 object. I have not done anything I think I'm gonna do, so I got a better face. This one's got a better face than that one. And then I shall utilize the same space there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make I think it would be a bust of a dragon type thing. So the base will be the neck, and then we'll have it curving up and then coming down. So we can take off the major curves for the neck and then the front of the head. So this larger curve or cut will be the neck, and then this will be the head, which means its face should be proportionate to the thickness of its neck. If I have the neck coming up all the way along here, I will want the jaw to maybe be about this area, so I can cut, and obviously we're cutting larger than we need to, so that way we have space to carve down into. So that is going to be our head. And then the neck will be proportionate coming down. However, we want it to come to about right here. So if the neck is here, we can cut straight through. Yep. There we go. And cut back down this direction. hook, which is the main neck of the dragon with its head. And this will be the base. Alright. We are going to try and curve this around a little bit so that way we have general shape curvature. I wouldn't go too far past the top of the head at first, because top of the head is where we're going to want like horns and stuff. Okay. So I'm going to start to shape the jaw a little bit here by getting the chin's width in place. That's what that's going to be. Then we'll have its mouth and its nose snout up here. So then the mouth will need to go back. Again, making sure we have more material to work with so we can carve down. By doing that, we have the beginnings of a mouth. So we have the jaw, and the nose, and then we have the head and the neck. Which we can make the neck more round just by cutting off the corners of the sculpture. We'll look further on from there. So our dragon, the snout will be usually almost a little bit bigger than the chin. With most creatures, they have a overbite instead of an underbite. So you need to determine how wide you want his actual mouth to be, and shave off from there. So that way you can have the approximation of a snout. And every dragon is different, so it's all up to your personal preference of how thick you want their jawline to be. So that's his jawline, so his snout will be ever so slightly larger up on top, so that way it goes down on top of it. Unless you want your dragon to have an underbite, which is awesome. Alright, so... And my dragon is going to look more like a snake because I'm not going to have too many protrusions on him. Only because I might want it to be a snake later on rather than a actual dragon, because I already have made a snake totem. So if I keep it snake themed, then I could even potentially keep it going for the, I think it's a Yanti, is the snake people in D&D. Gave it a little bit of a goatee type thing. Double spike. So, once we have his general face, but a lot of dragons, since they have a snout, will also have an eye ridge, unless their eyes are on the side of their head. So it's almost like an alligator in that fashion, to where they have a big flat zone, and then their eyes will stick out. And if you have eyes sticking out, then you can actually make it so that way he has horns as well. And got a same zone. And I'm just doing this off the top of my head, but if you want to pull up a picture or another one to work with, I also have Pop of Mushu, so I can bring Mushu over and have him as my reference. But I'm good on that without that for now. So the cut that I just did was to allow him to have some backward facing horns, which is, once you have where you want the eyes to be, come a little bit above that, straight across, and that will be the top of your horns. Decide how thick you want the horns to be, and then you will cut underneath that, leaving a flap. The flap can then be shaped into individual or multiple horns. Then you need to smooth it out a little bit underneath there, so that way, well, horns don't lay flat against the body. Again, looks like they got a little dewlap backbone. Yeah, that's it. Is that a better image? Yep. So that is the dragon and his little horns. So he's coming together. Then, once you have your actual section to where his dewlap is going to be, or his horns, and you can shave down the rest of his neck to be relatively proportionate to the thickness behind his ears, because that's where his neck would start, is actually behind the ears on a dragon. Those creatures, actually. Alright, so we got a nice curve to his neck and everything. I think that's about the thickness that I want his actual neck to be. However, I'm going to make it, since I gave him horns dewlap instead of keeping it more snake-like, I'm going to actually give him a little bit of back ridges. So that is as simple as choosing a length past his actual horns, because if you were to look up, you don't want his back ridges spiking him in his horns, or vice versa. So come back a little bit, and just the tiniest little bit in underneath the thickest part of his neck, and just cut out these tiny little ridges. Now you can do just little V's of cuts, so that way you just keep making the same ridges over and over, similar to how I made the pillar in the previous stream. And by doing this, it just adds in a little bit of extra detail on him. So instead of being a perfectly smooth neck like a snake might be, he's got ridges going along his spine. Once you get to the curve, it might be a little bit harder, but you know, he's still a dragon that is going to be rounder in shape for the most part, unless you want him to be a blocky dude, because you know, if he's a rock type dragon or stone construct dragon, then he would potentially be a block of stone. So you might want not perfectly rounded or smooth edges. You might want the jagged stone look. Now, I'm going to take a little bit more off of his stand here, so that way his neck looks like he's coming inward a little bit. So I'm going to take off a little chunk here to give his neck some more curvature. Okay, now that I think that's pretty good curve towards his neck. Gets a nice portrait bust. So then I'm going to shave off this part to make it more smooth, as if he were just leaning backwards and then leaning back to do some sort of attack, potentially. So I'm going to continue on with his back spikes and have them spike his on the dragon. Even if they're little ones, they don't have to be huge. But know that when you're carving into to make such as ridges for a neck and or back, they'll be smaller towards the back of the head, and then as they get to the shoulders, they'll gradually increase in size, and then they get usually to their peak at the shoulder blade, and then they stay that along the rest of the spine. So if you want to keep increasing the size of the ridges along the way, just remember that eventually they do get stagnant at some point. And then once they go past the, I think it would be classified as the hips, or even a couple inches, like a couple of vertebrae past that down the tail, then they'll shrink along the tail as well. So we have the horn dewlap, which will be turned into actual horns in a minute here. And we have the smaller ridges that turn into the larger ridges for the dragon's spine. Now, as I'm not doing any sort of major whisker type, I think this would be classified as a Western dragon. But, you know, dragon's a dragon. Going to smooth out some of his neck curvature here. And when you actually carve away spines like this, it'll make your dragon look chunky, fatter, thicker in ways. So I had to curve out the edges of his neck, so that way he looks a little bit slimmer, to where his spikes are in the center of his spine versus along the entirety of it, which makes it look rather odd when you have giant vertebrae and your spikes are the entire width of your neck versus just going along the spine section. Okay. Now he's only got a little itty bitty dewlap type horns. Not much I can do to them right now. But we can make the definition between the two eyes and the dragon's snout, because some of them have raised nostrils and raised eyes. All sorts. So I make it so that way got a nice curve even along his chins and cheekbones. Okay, so when I finished carving out what I want his mouth to be, I noticed that if I were to squish them together, it's got a bit of an underbite. So I need to shorten up his lower snout and increase the length of his jaw. So that way, or the inside of his mouth. So that way he'll have an overbite. Now this can be tricky work because if you cut too far, it'll look wrong. So just want to cut right where, hopefully where his jaw will be an underbite, overbite I mean. And you can remake his chin spikes. Okay, so now he's got his mouth and his eyes. Can do a little bit more with his horns here. And his horns are a different length from each other, so let me say he's a bit of a young dragon, so we shorten those up. And to definitely define his head a little bit more, we're going to go behind his jaw and cut out a tiny little area to give it some depth behind his cheeks. Make sure you round off these cuts so that way they don't look like they were just done on the fly. Dragon with some nice little chiseled jaw. And by doing this, it will actually make it so that way you can tell that the dragon has a head and can turn it. If it's just one big tube of meat for their neck towards their head, it might be harder for them to actually shift to see the prey. And then just smooth out the transition between the shrunken neck section past the jaw and the main neck body just by giving a nice gradual slope towards that. And with that, we have ourselves a little dragon dude. Right. Let's see. So he's got some nice ridges. Show off the ridges, which is why I'm making it super bright against the black. I do apologize about the brightness though. So with that, he's got the ridges and then his nice horns up here. Those will be where his eye ridges are. And you should be able to see he's got raised nose ridges as well as his teeth. In this section, he's got the chin strap. Chin spikes. Alright. And that is today's hour of crafting. Hope you all enjoyed, those of you who are joining me today. And I hope you have a great day. Peace out.